Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first set of functional panels during Google's VetNet Career Week. I am Tricia McGrath-Hess. I am a Google recruiter. I'm also the VetNet lead in New York City and the proud wife of a retired Army colonel. We're so glad to have you here with us today. Over the next hour, I'll be talking with 4 Googlers in non-engineering technical roles to discuss their journeys, their recommendations for finding similar roles, and what day-to-day life and expectations are like in their individual functions. These particular roles that you're going to hear about are technical in nature, but they're not necessarily in coding or programming. So you don't need a CS degree, though you can have one. Through hearing their stories, we'll uncover helpful insights to inform your own career decisions as you move forward in this process. Let's get started right now. We have an amazing panel for you and we have lots of questions. So here we go. Zeus, Nathan, Benjamin, and Saskia are joining us on our panel. I'd love for you each to introduce yourself, tell us what team you work on, and at a high level for us, explain what you do at Google. Let's start with you, Jesus.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jesus. I am a site reliability engineer at Google, and I am in charge of managing large fleets of Windows devices.
Excellent. Let's go over to Benjamin.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Benjamin Howard. I am a global talent consultant on a team called TI2 and recently just completed the ladder transfer for a user experience researcher.
Saskia.
Hi, everyone. I am Saskia. I'm a technical writer at one of our Google data centers. I write technical documentation from everything for swapping out servers to restarting generators, everything that is necessary to make Google go.
Excellent. And Nathan, bringing up the rear.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Nathan here. I'm a data analyst in trust and safety. And what I do is I help protect Google's users from fraud and abuse.
Excellent, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have lots of questions for you. I'm a recruiter, so I'm naturally curious. But let's get started. Why don't we start with Benjamin? Let's talk to you first. So you are on our labor market analysis team and now moving into another area at Google. Tell me, how did you get started, like in your current role? Tell me how you came to Google and how this process worked for you.
Yeah, so the first thing that I like to tell people was networking authentically is the way that I got here. I had an opportunity to connect with a number of individuals in the Seattle office at Google, all veterans as well, and they were more than welcome to invite me up to the campus. Over the course of the next year while I was at grad school, I just built up a relationship with them and established this friendship. And when I was finishing up my internship, they invited me back to the campus again in order to take part in the Veteran Resume workshop. It was there that I happened to meet a recruiter whose husband I had actually met, being that he had done a similar internship as I did. We connected. She really got to know me, some of my goals and aspirations, and presented me with a list of roles. I happened to find the role TI2 very, very enticing, being that it was going to allow me to utilize a lot of the skills that I had developed during grad school. And so once I decided on that role, went through the interview process, really got to know the team, became enamored with it, and transitioned into Google. So it was a very quick journey, but one that I think was established definitely from networking authentically here at Google.
That's excellent. Sometimes job searches can take a little bit of time, so it's nice to hear that it actually happened pretty quickly for you. Networking is an amazing way to kind of get into a space. Saskia, let's jump over to you. Tell me a little bit about the path that you charted to get here to Google. You have a really interesting background. You're a technical writer here at Google. Not a lot of folks are really going to understand that and how you get to be a technical writer. So can you share that with us, your path?
Yeah, sure. I actually went to university to be a chemical engineer And I found out pretty quickly in my first semester that I didn't really like it and I wasn't very good at it. I had always really been passionate about English and reading and literature. And I was never really all that great in math and science, but I also love technology. So I poured over the course catalog and I found technical writing, which you have to have a really strong technical aptitude, but you also have to be really well versed, obviously, in the English language and be a great listener and a great communicator. So it was really like left brain, right brain, best of both worlds for me. So I went on to get my MA in professional writing. So I got my BS in technical writing and my MA in professional writing. My first job out of grad school was as a technical writer. I spent about the next 10 years of my career doing more program management, product management, mostly in software. And then I ended up working for the DoD. I worked at SPAWAR, which is now the Naval Information Warfare Center, as a project manager. And one day my department had called me into his office and he said that Google was building a data center really close by, and a former buddy of his that he'd worked with at the FBI was looking to hire a tech writer. And he wrote the gentleman's name down on a sticky note and his phone number and slid it across the table to me and said, Saskia, don't you dare tell anyone I gave this to you. And I made the call, and the rest, I've been here for 8 years.
Saskia, can you just share for the audience who might not know, what do you do in your day-to-day? Like, what is a technical writer's job?
So I think the most critical thing, so there's 3 parts, I think, to being a successful technical writer. One I already talked about, which is listening and communication. I think you have to have a really strong technical aptitude. You have to, learning new things really has to excite you. You know, being uncomfortable really has to excite you, because when you learn new things, it's not necessarily going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be very comfortable at first. And project management skills, I think, are the third thing that rounds that out. But what I do is, I think in a nutshell, is I take really complex information, make it simple, and make it easy to understand.
That's amazing, because that's a skill that we all need when we go on looking for help in any of these technical areas, for those of us who are not super technical. Okay, so I have to talk now to Nathan. Nathan, you're in Trust and Safety, which is one of our most amazing groups, but very little known to the outside world and to folks outside of tech. So can you share with us how you got into that space, and what surprised you about it and what learnings you have there?
Sure. So, I'm a data analyst, and I fell in love with data science when I was getting my MBA. And then basically worked my way into a hands-on role at a previous company, and then was able to, kind of similar to some of the other panelists, network my way into Google. And I came in being, I guess, more focused on getting to learn more about machine learning, but really when I really fell in love with the problem space of protecting Google's users from fraud and abuse. So that was maybe a surprise, is that I came in with more of a tool focus and really kind of have shifted more to the problem focus, and I plan on spending the rest of my career in the trust and safety area. And so it could be, yeah, good.
Well, I just wanted to ask you to explain a little bit about what trust and safety does, because it's really unknown to a lot of people. How would you summarize it? If you're in an elevator, you're at a cocktail party, how do you tell people what you do?
Yeah, so trust and safety in general, protects, Google has lots of products, right? Whether it's Chrome or Gmail or anything like that. So there's teams in trust and safety that would protect Gmail from spammy emails, or would protect Chrome from malicious extensions. So we're a pretty large organization, so there's lots of different teams. So yeah, that's kind of part of it, right?
Yeah, that's great. When we go to conferences, hiring conferences, people rarely understand, and they don't understand how important of an area that is for our products to be protected from all kinds of bad actors. So that's an amazing task, what you do. Hey, Zeus, let's talk about you. Tell me a little bit about your role. And you have a really interesting path coming to Google as well. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, I'm sure that our viewers would really enjoy hearing that.
Yes. So I got started at Google in 2012. It took a while for me to get through my AA and then I did an AA in business administration. And then after that, I did a bachelor's in IT. And it was a long shot for me. I happened to be looking for a job as soon as I graduated, and I landed on the Google site page. I didn't think that I could fit for any particular role. And as I started searching, I found a program called the IT Residency Program. And that program is designed to bootstrap IT careers. Up until that time, I thought you needed a degree in computer engineering or computer science in order to get into Google. So I got started in tech support. The role was primarily to help Googlers inside how to navigate the many technical aspects that exist. And after that, I started working on moving into a more of a administrative role towards systems administration. And that progressed into site reliability engineering. And what I do on a day-to-day is I do automation for large groups of systems in order to manage them effectively and efficiently.
That's great. So for those of you who don't know, like for our viewers, TechStop is where Googlers who have a problem with their computer or any kind of tech problem go. We can ping them, we can call them, we can run there in tears when our computer doesn't work, and very rational people who are very skilled take your computer and help you. So it's really, not everyone at Google is incredibly technical and is here to fix their own computer. That is not true, right? So a lot of us require and need the help of someone like Jesus or whoever is in the IT resident program for TechStop, which is, I think, a very important area of Google to provide support to Googlers. That's great. Jesus, tell me a little bit about, you've been on the tech side now, supporting Googlers in sort of our corporate engineering area for some time. Tell me a little bit about what has surprised you in Google's use of technology or Googlers' use of technology. What's surprising for people? What our viewers think was kind of interesting?
Well, one of the main things that I talk about is the scale of how Google operates. So when I go to conferences and I talk to people about, oh, well, you're doing a tech support role now, how many systems do you normally work with? And it's usually in the hundreds or in the thousands. And when I propose some of the questions, it usually ends up being, okay, so you solve that problem for 10 people and you solve it for 100. How do you do that for 10,000? How do you scale that to 30,000 or 100,000? And the group that I work with, which is Core Platforms, we manage the Linux, Mac, Chrome OS, Windows, and iOS and Android fleet for all Googlers. So when I talk about hundreds of thousands, that's not, overshooting it. In fact, it might be on the underside. If you figure that we have about 120,000 employees and each one needs a computer, and most engineers have two computers. They have a laptop, they have a computer, plus their phones. It becomes a very large problem, and we have to solve for that in the most efficient manner. Yes.
That's incredible scope. For anyone who doesn't understand that, it's incredible scope that you cover. That's great. Now let's move over a little bit. Let's talk about starting the journey for our veterans and MilSpouses who are watching this today and thinking, I just don't know that Google is a place that I'm going to be able to get into. I don't know if I'm going to be able to succeed. Benjamin, I'm going to turn this to you and ask you, what is your biggest recommendation for veterans or MilSpouses with limited or to no experience who are looking to begin a career and let's just say in people operations, which is kind of where you have started, which for those viewers, that is our HR team. So Benjamin, what kind of advice are you giving to folks in the military who don't have a lot, or spouses who don't have a lot of experience? What are you suggesting that they do to get on your path?
That's a great question. So the first thing that I would definitely recommend is figure out what you want your day-to-day to look like. I think a lot of people, when they go into the career exploration phase, they try to, understand what their skill sets are. Definitely, you understand how you would like to operate. But for me, it really boiled down to thinking what my day-to-day looked like. From there, when I was deciding to make that transition out of the military, I knew I wanted to be able to continue to operate in a very autonomous nature. I'm a very team-oriented individual coming from special operations, so I wanted my day to look like that. I wanted to be able to work with individuals with humble intelligence that had team-oriented mindset. Also, I thought about the skill sets that I had accumulated into the military, and once I was getting out and starting my MBA program, the skills that I would accumulate during that time as well. After that, it was really about executing the same way in which I operated in the military. I created my plan, I created my path, and then I stuck to that. Identified my goals, identified what I wanted that day-to-day look like, and made sure that I leaned on individuals that had made that transition successfully, networked with them, found that mentorship, and from there started, charting my path forward. With transitioning military service members and military spouses, this process is never easy. I think there are these misconceptions that exist around the community. So you really have to make sure you're detail oriented in that plan and sticking to it. There's going to be times where I feel like it is a little bit difficult. For me, it definitely was. But knowing that I had this path forward and I had created it, it kind of served as a roadmap. So anytime that I thought about getting off course, just let that kind of guide me. I think that's the best place to start. Right there.
You'd be a great program manager. This is amazing. You're like you got a whole program going on there. Nathan, what about you? Tell me what advice you would give to service members, military spouses, veterans who are looking at trust and safety, but maybe don't have a ton of experience in that. What's the path that you recommend for them? Is there training? Are there courses that they can take? Share a little bit with us about that, please.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I want to give a plug to a course on Coursera that was recently released. It's the Data Analyst Career Certificate, and it's by Grow with Google, and it is specifically targeted to take a learner and equip them with all the skills they need to succeed as a entry-level data analyst. And I helped as a content reviewer for that course, so I'm very proud of what the team has put together. So that specific certificate is, of course I'm biased. It's a really great way to kind of go from where you are now to a really functional place, and just to kind of be a cheerleader a little bit more for data analysis. It's a really flexible skill set. So and it's useful in almost any other role that you have later in your career. So you're not pigeonholing yourself by developing that skill set. And yes, as I mentioned before, trust and safety has some what I think are very interesting and fulfilling problems to work on, especially for veterans who are used to kind of the mission of defending and having adversaries. You still have elements of that in trust and safety. So yeah, and just I guess one final thing is that the career certificate training is just one example of where you are taking your passion and your interest, and you're executing an action that provides some sort of evidence of your actual interest. So just saying you're interested in data and analysis is one thing, but you need to really harness that and, create a portfolio or take some courses or do a hackathon or things like that are great ways of getting really practical evidence that you can talk about when you're networking and when you're actually in the interview situation.
That's incredibly valuable advice. And thank you for sharing that Grow with Google program, that certificate program. I mean, as a recruiter at Google, I can tell you that we hire data roles across this company, right? So we have them in all different regions, in all different product areas, and all different groups. We have them in finance, where I cover finance. We have them in legal. I mean, there's just so much data out there, and harnessing it is so vital to the work that we do. So that is an amazing program, and one that I hope people will have a chance to check out. And the fact that it was put together and blessed by a data analyst at Google should let people know that it's the real deal. So that's wonderful. Thank you, for sharing that, Nathan.
Sure, and one more thing is that Google and a consortium of other companies are treating the data analyst career certificate and some of the other certificates as the necessary education in lieu of a 4-year degree. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's also a really important piece of that.
That's great to know, because not everyone has the ability to get a 4-year degree, and they have other ways to do it now, other ways to get that training that they need. Jesus, can I jump over to you again?
Yes.
Tell me what advice you give the folks in the military who are looking to take your path and who are looking to start a career in IT. Tell me a little bit about, what do you tell them when someone says, hey, Jesus, can we grab a coffee and talk about how to get into this business? What do you tell them? You've shared your interesting path with us. So tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yes. So IT is it's like an umbrella for a lot of the technology related fields. And so what ends up happening is that there are many tracks that you can take within it. And a lot of people don't realize that in many companies, you either have to specialize in a particular track, and for others, you have to be a jack of all trades. So it starts with, like Nathan said, something like the IT certificate program that Google developed for IT, and that covers a lot of the basics, which is problem solving and a little bit of programming. And it's not programming to the extent that you're going to end up with like a CS degree, but it's functional enough to where you can start automating some of the day-to-day job. As I mentioned, you can start by working on 1 computer, 10 computers, 100, but once it reaches a critical mass, you have to start automating some of it. So the ideal path for IT is that you get started in it, usually with some problem solving. You start fixing friends and family's computers or tablets. You're the go-to person for fixing things. And once you get that, you start developing a sense for what it is that you like. Maybe you enjoy the networking aspect, or you enjoy creating databases or fixing data, or working with operating systems and understanding how they work. And once you get started down that path, you start finding the satisfaction that comes from solving really hard problems. And that leads you into system administration, where you start working with multiple systems. You start working with servers and clients. And the evolution to that is site reliability, where now you take hundreds of servers and hundreds of clients, and you make sure that they always work and that they become reliable for their users. In terms of getting started, it's like a snowball effect. You start with a little bit, and then it starts growing until you reach that level of mastery where you're like, oh, people start asking you questions like, how do I fix this printer? Or how do I connect to the internet? And you can start rattling, the path to doing that off the top of your head without having to look up at the instructions or detailing exactly how it works. And beyond that, you start seeing that maybe you work primarily with Mac, but when you start working with Windows, there's a lot of similarities to it, and the same thing with Linux. And you start, building your portfolio or expanding your portfolio by noticing that a lot of that is you translate it across the different operating systems, and now your knowledge just exponentially grew because of that.
Hey, Zeus, I hope people are taking notes. This is incredibly valuable. This is like a course on IT. I love it. I'm learning so much now. So maybe I'll stop going to TechStop as much when it opens, because you're helping and sharing. Saskia, you came to us from you said the DoD, right? And so tell me what advice you give to folks who are trying to leave government. So a lot of people who are veterans, their first stop is sometimes working in government. What advice do you give them if they kind of want to come into industry or the tech industry like Google? How do they make that happen?
So I'll speak specifically to technical writing. I think I said before, project management, I think is just a key foundational thing that you have to be successful in any of these roles. So I think project and program management fundamentals are huge. For technical writing, I know when I'm doing interviewing and I'm doing hiring, a relevant degree is great, but I would much prefer to see somebody that has perhaps a certificate. You can there's certificate programs from the Society of Technical Communicators, Coursera, things like that, and that has a really strong portfolio. So I think, and one way to kind of develop that portfolio without getting a full-time job first is perhaps getting involved in the open source community. So going out online, looking at code and seeing, looking at documentation. Because if you go online and you look at code at GitHub or something like that, you'll find that most of it doesn't have documentation, and the documentation that it has isn't that great to begin with. So you can go out and offer your help and say, I would love to help you write documentation to go along with this code to make it better. And so you're doing two things. When you're doing that, you're helping other people, you're helping the open source community, and then you're also building your portfolio. So those would be the high level, the kind of things I would recommend.
That's excellent. Okay, so now Benjamin, I'm going to give you the passion question. How do veterans and military spouses, how do they translate their passion for a role into being an asset for a hiring manager? How are you putting that on your resume? How are you sharing that in an interview? How do you get your passion front and center for a hiring manager?
That is a great question. Speaking first of the resume component of it, that is what I really struggled with. Not only, entering Google, but then when I began to make this transition to the UXR role, is trying to take all that information and all the things that I've done, all the things that I, just really, really am passionate about, and translating that into a way that A, is going to be digestible based on the audience, and then C, not going to diminish the gravity of the work that you've done. And for me, what really helped was when roles would come available that I was interested in, I would take a look at that, really go through, scan it, see what they were asking about, and then I would think about all the experience that I had and how to best translate that information into a way that fit the requirements for that role, whether they were the job responsibilities or duties, the minimum requirements, the preferred requirements. And also, I talked about this a little bit earlier, the mentorship aspect, being able to rely on individuals that have walked that path before you and bounce ideas off of them. I think as adults, sometimes we naturally, want to do things ourselves, and we are hesitant to seek out help. But if you ask anybody in this room if they would like to help someone, everyone would raise their hand. So it's kind of weird to think that, we still struggle with asking for help. But being able to bounce those ideas off of my mentors really helped me out in order to kind of cultivate that story that I wanted to tell, so they could really get a sense of the passion that I had for the work and my ability to actually execute it. I think for the latter transfer portion of the UXR role, that really became evident because I was jumping from a completely different career as a global talent consultant in special operations to now a more technical role. So I had to find a way to show that linkage between the previous skill set that I had developed and the new skill set that I was trying to exhibit. And so leaning on mentors, being able to really take a look at those job postings really helped me kind of bring that passion across.
Thank you so much for that answer. That was wonderful. And you mentioned earlier also the Google Resume Workshop. And so our viewers today, those folks who are watching us today, a lot of them are going to be meeting with a mentor, meeting with a resume mentor. First, I'd just like to say, that is one of the most rewarding times in the year for folks who are Googlers and veterans and allies. We love it. We love when we get asked to review resumes as part of this. I mean, we love that mentorship. Benjamin, knowing that a lot of these folks who are watching this are going to that resume workshop as you had in the past, what kind of questions do you think they should be asking their resume reviewer? What kind of things, what kind of guidance should they be looking for?
I think relevancy of information in an effort to make sure that we're getting, who we are across and our skill set across. We can be very, very verbose, and we can put a lot of information that may not be necessarily relevant for the particular role that you're after. So speaking with those Googlers who are assisting in this resume workshop is going to allow you to really break down that information and make it very succinct, focusing on the key skills, the job responsibilities of the role that you would like to go into. And so asking them, hey, how does this sound? Is there a better way that I can write this? Do you understand what I am trying to convey, because to us, it's going to make sense because we speak that language. But when you're presenting, especially from being a veteran or an active duty member transitioning or a military spouse, a lot of the verbiage that you're going to typically use, people on the outside are not very familiar with. And so being able to ask those questions to see if it makes sense to someone else that doesn't necessarily speak the language is going to be actually very, very key in order to make sure that your resume is readable, that does not diminish the impact of the results that you had, and then also really hits on some of the job responsibilities and qualifications that they're looking for.
That's a fantastic answer. In staffing, we love to hire veterans, and you're bringing up such a great point. I mean, a lot of our recruiters are not veterans. They're not military spouses. They just don't have a lot of familiarity with the community. So when you write your resume and make it very plain language so that a recruiter can understand it and pitch you to the hiring manager, that really, really helps us help you. So yeah. I think that's something that's important. Nathan, I want to jump over to you. I want to ask you about resumes, and you obviously have reviewed a lot of them here at Google. What advice are you giving, similar to Benjamin, to the folks who are going to be doing this workshop and who are going to be asking for help, even as particularly your data folks? Like, what are you wanting to see on a resume?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, I'm super passionate about helping people with their resumes. And this is my favorite volunteer event every year. And I think a lot of people think their resume is pretty good, but it's actually not. So first, number one rule, it needs to be a single page. No matter if you have 30 years of experience, get it down to a single page. Also, what can be helpful as you're coming to the resume workshop is you could have 2 or 3 pages of different bullet points. And I think this is kind of what Benjamin was getting to, is that you're going to want to customize your resume to different types of roles. And I guess another big thing I try to help my resume mentees with is adding some personality to the resume. Because I think some people, especially veterans, they can default to being overly professional and like really kind of sterile in the resume, when they have a great personality and some really interesting things about them that helps make them more memorable and kind of like can be great icebreakers with your interviewers, right? So that's not necessarily easy to do, but that's what I try to help my resume mentees with. That's
excellent advice. I think also kind of what you're saying too is like kind of investigate the culture of a place. When I'm called Miss or Mrs. something in an email, it's just a little strange because, we don't do that at Google, but it's completely respectful in other areas, but you really kind of have to understand that and what is happening there. Let's move over to some helpful military programs.
Actually, sorry, Tricia.
Would love it.
Yes, in terms of resume, I'd also like to add that one of the things that military or veterans and military spouses need to keep in mind is that you have a lot of experience that doesn't normally come to front of mind when you're looking for a job. And for example, I was a Marine and I was a hygiene equipment operator. But while I was in the Marines, I did more computer work than I ever did outside. And my experience on my resume, yes, I was a hygiene equipment operator and I was good at my job. But the computer or the work that I did with computers also built up on my experience. So the achievements that I made in the military towards computers was the front and center thing on my resume, not the work that I did as a Marine, not the work that I did as a hygiene equipment operator. And in addition to that is that in the military, sometimes you have to solve really hard problems with very little resources. And even though they may not relate to the job that you were supposed to be doing in the military, it brings experience that you can put on your resume that employers are looking for. So if you were deployed and you had to, come up with a way to network machines with, less wire than you normally would have to do, and you came up with a really nifty way of stretching that wire out, put that on your resume, was able to connect n number of computers using these resources. Anybody that works on that field would realize that you were constrained, and they'll see the value of what you brought to that situation.
That's great. That's a great thing to say. Nathan, you had something to say to add to that?
Yeah, just to piggyback on Jesus's recommendation. Also, don't get hung up on listing out your super long official job title and other stuff. Break it down into plain English, right? Like, flexible problem solver in austere environments. Like, that can also make it a little bit more fun, in addition to being easier to consume. So, like, for one of mine, I put like data detective, or customer focused support engineer, or something like that. Like, you can jazz it up and make it more understandable.
Yes, it's not only good for recruiters, it's great for interviewers, because it opens up conversations that allow you to expand on that verbally rather than having to write it down on paper.
That's great. Okay, that was super. One thing I will just say as a recruiter, like what I notice, and working with veterans as closely as I do now, it's veterans are incredibly humble, and they don't like to brag, and they don't like to take credit for something that was the team's. But like, your resume is a chance for you to brag. It's a chance for you to highlight your skills and your passions. And you've just gotten some really wonderful advice from Jesus and Nathan and Benjamin on this, and also Saskia on it. So really think about it, and think about what you're putting out there. And you have so many skills, and just try to get them on your resume and have them shared, because it's not the time to be humble on your resume. It's a marketing document. And even if you need to show it to 5 people and say, does this sound good? Yes, do that, because that's what we really need to see. Let's talk about actually having the job. So let's talk about what kind of habits and what kind of values like breed success in your industry. Let's start with you, Benjamin. Tell me a little bit about what you see as success, and really how members of the military can thrive in this space too. And you could talk about both. You could talk about your UXR work, or you can talk about your current work.
Yeah. So I'm a really intrinsically motivated person. So when I think about success, it's largely based off of that. And I think most military individuals can relate to that. An ethos that we had was quiet professionals. We didn't care about who got accolades, who got rewards, who got recognized for anything. So success for me was very intrinsic. I do a lot of things for my own edification in terms of like knowledge management and knowledge gain. And so when I think about what is going to lead me to be successful, or how that success is defined, is am I continuing to grow in that role? Am I continuing to learn in that role? Am I being challenged in that role? Am I solving the problems that I sought out to solve, and are they difficult to solve? And for me, if I'm answering those questions with a yes, that means I'm achieving a level of success that is most important to me. I do understand that for some people, it could be in the terms of promotion or monetary rewards and things like that. But if you go and take a step back and you really drill down to some of the things that I just talked about, those things are naturally going to happen. I can't think of anybody who has continued to pursue knowledge and really enjoy it that have not been successful. So for me, that's how I would really define what success looks like in the role. In terms of on the UXR side, when you think about what it actually looks like in terms of measurable, are the users happy? Are the products and the services that you're working on actually drilling down to that kind of sentiment factor, and people are actually enjoying those products or services, able to navigate them easily, not having issues in terms of the functionality of dashboards or products? And so you can see that success for there. And so that's kind of an external factor. But when you think about the internal success for you, I really measure it on my knowledge growth.
That's excellent. That's great. That's good advice. And that's really helpful. Saskia, let's jump over to you. You have just made a big change here at Google, moving from one role to the next. Talk to me a little bit about doing that and having the courage to do something like that, because it's very similar to folks now who are applying to Google. You applied to a new role at Google. So talk a little bit about that and how you navigated that and your advice to folks in that situation.
Yeah, so I think this also kind of plays into misconceptions about working in tech roles. I think especially for tech writers, you don't have to be an expert in the domain. You don't have to have a computer science degree. You don't need to be able to have to code, be successful. But your core set of skills has to be really strong. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that is, so I've been here for about 8 years, and when I was interviewing for my job at Google data centers, I had to study to know what the parts of a computer were. Like a CPU, a motherboard, and I'm working in a facility where we build these things and run them every day. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is 8 years later, going from walking in the door and knowing nothing, I'm now contributing to a book about cloud computing in Google data centers. So if you don't have domain specific experience, that's okay. And what I'm doing now is I'm moving away after 8 years of being at Google data centers. I'm going to be moving into another tech writing role into our internal developer relations team. And so I'm going to be going back sort of. I haven't worked in software or systems or data exchange in 15 years. So I think rusty is an understatement, but I'm going to be working on a new product and a new team with only software engineers that does integration testing, differential testing throughout all of our core set of products. So, the fear factor is real. And I think one thing about that is kind of talking about imposter syndrome a little bit. So I don't have any domain related experience, but I'm going in not in an entry level role either. So it's double. So I think feel about imposter syndrome is that I always tell myself, if you're too intimidated to ask questions, you're never going to learn anything. You're never going to grow. And I think, especially in an interview, if somebody asks a question and you don't know, I think saying, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out and come back with the answer is one of the most powerful tools that you have. I would much rather someone say that to me than sit there and say words at me that don't really mean anything. I think that there's so much strength in saying that you don't know. And I guarantee you that, if I ask an expert a question, I don't get a times out of 10, it's because they don't know either, but they're afraid to say that they don't know. And, fear to me, imposter syndrome is about fear. And fear is nothing but, what is fear? Evidence appearing real. So I think just like being authentic and being just empowered to ask questions is and not being afraid to learn and grow is really core to kind of combating that imposter syndrome.
That's great. Let's talk about imposter syndrome a little bit. So a lot of people coming out of the military in their first role or military spouse, they feel that they don't belong here. We hear that from Googlers all the time, that most people at Google don't understand how they got hired. They're still surprised they were hired. They're still thrilled they were hired. Nathan, this question is coming to you. What advice do you give people who have imposter syndrome? And that's a lot of us here at Google, but how do you think people handle it? How do you advise people to handle it? How do you handle it if you've ever had it? Share a little bit about imposter syndrome with us.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing is to realize that, especially at a place like Google, it's very common. So you're not alone. And then, I think it also can, use it to your advantage to keep your ego small. And also particularly at Google, when you're first hired, you're called a noogler, and you want to use that noogler label for as long as possible to ask as many questions. And I think by also keeping your ego small, keeping a beginner's mind, you can, and kind of like Jesus mentioned, as you're building up kind of your core kernel of expertise, like you'll start to kind of hopefully reduce the amount of imposter syndrome you have, maybe until you shift roles or shift areas and you have to kind of start over again. But yeah, I'd say that's, and I think it can also, as you're also helping other people, that can also highlight how much you've really grown along the way and can help bolster your confidence.
Hey, Zeus, why don't we toss the imposter syndrome question over to you? Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective. I mean, you're obviously in an area where you have to constantly learn new things. And how do you handle that? How do you encourage the folks that you work with, or advice that you give to some veterans or MilSpouses who may feel that way? Like, because you're in an area where you really just have to keep learning. Like, I think it's assumed you don't know a lot of the new things you walk into. So tell us a little bit about that. What would you advise them on?
So I'm going to start answering that question by saying that I started at Google in IT support, and it is a 26-month program. And at the end, you're expected to either move on to other companies or to apply within Google. And moving into a new role within Google is daunting. As Saskia has mentioned, Benjamin has mentioned, you're learning pretty much everything from scratch, or you're bringing in your knowledge, but you're also taking on a lot more responsibility than you used to. So yes, it's very normal to feel like, what am I doing here? Or am I doing this right? Or do I belong here? But I use that to tell myself, if I get so confident with my role that I no longer feel like that, then I stopped growing. And it's time to move on to new roles. So when that happened in ITR, I moved on to corporate operations engineering. When that happened in corporate operations engineering, I moved over to system administration. And once we transitioned into site reliability engineering, it felt like the same thing. You feel like the job is kind of the same, but there are more responsibilities, there are more things to learn, and new things come out all the time. So the minute I feel within my team that I've already mastered the area that I work on, I talk to my manager, and then I move on to a different area where I have to learn a whole bunch of new things and kind of get that feeling again. And that's on the mild side of imposter syndrome. Most of the times it's paralyzing and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and should I? But once you get to that feeling, that kind of pushes you to look for mentors, people that will give you that verbal feedback that says, no, you're on the right track. You're not supposed to know everything. Here's where I can get you started, or talk to this person because they did that already. And as a mentor to Googlers and to external candidates, what I tell them is, you look for what you want to be passionate about. And when you find people that are already doing that, they can give you the advice to say, well, it looks like you're kind of treading water right now, or you're no longer learning at this particular role. So how about you take on this additional responsibility and then grow a little bit outside of your comfort zone?
That's excellent.
Can I?
Oh, yeah, jump in.
Can I add something on an imposter syndrome? Because I think I experienced this definitely coming into Google. So, I transitioned out of the military and I immediately started grad school. In grad school, I completed my internship, and then before the ink was dry on my diploma, I was swooped into Google. And so I felt that there was not a lot of time outside of the military that I had in a corporate setting or in tech. And so when I joined this role, I definitely suffered from imposter syndrome, to the point that you had originally made, kind of saying, how did I get here? And I set out to continue to prove myself, to prove that I belong. And I had someone talk to me about that, say, you don't need to prove that you belong. Google has one of the toughest interview process known out there. And the fact that you successfully navigated that process already shows that you have the skills needed in order to successfully do the role in which you were hired for. So now you don't have to prove that you belong. That's already been proven. You have to prove that you can continue to contribute meaningfully. And when it comes to the imposter syndrome, there's a book that I was just finishing up called Think Again by Adam Grant. He mentions that. And Nathan, you hit on it a bit. The individuals that continue to be successful despite having imposter syndrome are individuals that go into any situation being humble. And I like to say that I am never the smartest person in the room. I will never be the smartest person in the room, but what I continue to do is rely on the skills that I accumulated in my military career, and also rely on my hard work and staying humble. So anybody who's suffering from imposter syndrome, believe that you can do it. You have the skill set, or else you wouldn't be there in the beginning.
I'd like to add something to that that I think is super crucial is I think another misconception is that tech skills, having tech skills to be successful is what you need. And really, in my opinion, in my field specifically, is that people's skills, soft skills are equally as important. If not, I'm going to go ahead and say more important than the technical skills, because you can learn the technical skills, but the 99% of my job is building a rapport with people. I have to get information from people in order to be able to do my job. And if I don't know how to build rapport or draw out information, or if I'm a poor communicator or I'm unpleasant to be around, no one's going to want to give me the information that I need to do my job. So I really think, focusing on communication and soft skills is really important.
Great. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. So I'd like to go around to each and ask each of you this question. What advice are you giving veterans who are looking for a tech role? Or in your tech role, it could be your tech role or just a role in the tech industry. And if you would each just go around, let's start with Nathan this time.
Yeah, just to kind of hit some key points from what we talked about before, I would say it's, a lot of skills you already have, such as Saskia just mentioned, where it's the interpersonal skills, those are super critical. And you're probably already more qualified than you know. Mm-hmm. But when there are specific skills that you do need to build out your qualifications, that's where the different career certificates and other types of activities can really have that shine through. So yeah, those are kind of my two main pieces of advice for veterans and MilSpouses.
Okay, let's go over to Benjamin.
For me, definitely read. Research methodology. There are over 100 different methods that you can utilize. Being able to understand the pros and cons and the trade-offs of each research methodology, I think, are absolutely key. There's a lot of literature available, and whether that be from the book or being able to jump on a site. And so, if individuals decide to connect with me after this, happy to send over a reading list that was given to me in order to assist me in my transition.
That's great. Saskia?
Yeah, I would say, again, reading, doing a Google search, finding out, what tech writing is really like. I think the good and the bad is crucial, taking some online courses. And then I also think that finding out what you're passionate about, I think that's the most important thing.
Excellent. Hey, Zeus, I'm going to give you the last word here on your advice for veterans getting into tech.
It's going to start small, but you got to start somewhere and think big, scale it out. The more you can do it to a point where you're thinking how to efficiently manage whatever it is that you're doing at a larger scale, or even, for example, for recruiters, they don't want to hire in a one-to-one. If they can reach an audience of 100 or 1,000 at a time, they would. So, and it's the same thing in tech, and it's the same thing in a lot of careers. So just start small, learn the basics, and then scale that out and grow outside of yourself.
Oh my gosh, you guys, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much to our panel, Jesus, Nathan, Benjamin, and Saskia. This was so informative for me, so I'm hoping that our viewers thought it was as well. So thank you so much for sharing your journeys with us. They were each very interesting, and I know appreciated by the viewers. So to our viewers, if you're interested in learning more about Google, which we hope you are, our roles and our opportunities, or if you'd like to read more about our career readiness materials, you can check out our resources tab, which is conveniently located in the Google VetNet Career Week landing page. And then following this panel, which I think our panel was the best panel, but we are having more panels at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And you can join the live stream and ask to hear from panelists in those spaces. And they're going to talk more in some sales, marketing, finance, policy and comms, and project management. More on my side of the house. But if you're also interested in hearing more about other non-engineering technical roles, or actually even the engineering roles that we would consider to be kind of software engineer roles, you can view those panels as well. They're going to be listed on the Career Week landing page. And all of the functional and industry panels are going to be recorded to view later at go.co/vets if you missed any of the panels. So I really hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're going to have a wonderful career week and learn a lot. And thank you so much again to our panel for sharing your stories with us. So everyone have a wonderful day and enjoy Google Career Week. Thanks so much.